The amazing thing about working with Linus is that every conversation is one of the amazing things is that every conversation is emotional. And so when we first spoke for Saltburn, years ago, it was thank you. That was the first conversation we had, which was what feeling do you want? And when it came to Wuthering Heights, this book, and the world of the Gothic is about feeling. And so the early conversations that we had really were emotional and about shape and texture and colour and they kind of tend to be a little bit more sort of witchy than kind of specific, I guess.
Yeah. No. Sorry. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I feel like it's always important that the visual storytelling is emotional. I think it's sort of the core of cinematography. I think it should not just sort of tell the story of the plot or what's going on, but rather because that's happening naturally anyway. So, but working with Emerald, obviously on this film and also Burn as well is a unique experience for me because she has a lot of intent with the emotions and in this case, which was sort of like your vision of how this film was when you read it, right? It's like your original sort of visuals of how that looked like, which shaped everything that we all worked with what Susie did with the production design and why there's rocks coming out of the walls or the costumes and all that is sort of right from Emerald's mind. So it's really, that was very inspiring because it felt like there was no limits to how expressive we could be with this love story, because it's obviously a love story and explosive at times, and you really could go kind of all the way in a way, like with Free Reins. It wasn't like I mean, normally in a film you always have some sort of realism to also that you might be bound to, but in this case the realism is sort of Emerald's world, so we could go all the way somehow.
Yeah, I mean, what I love about this movie is it's a more is more movie. I mean, it's just I love how much you guys just go for it. And so Emerald, you read this book and fell in love with it when you were like 14. So, and it sounded, were you trying to capture the initial feeling you felt back then, or have your feelings about the book evolved over the years?
I think my feelings about the book have absolutely evolved, but it was really an attempt, given the book is so complicated, so strange and so slippery and changeable. It really, what I wanted to make was absolutely, as Lena says, something that felt like the world of a 14-year-old girl reading this book for the first time, which meant that things are sort of a little more heightened than they could be, or a little more anachronistic maybe. And so it was really for all of us in every department, but always sort of starting with Linus, and it is building a world that makes sense in and of itself. And that's sort of, that's what Powell and Pressburger did, and it's what sort of, all of those great filmmakers of the kind of 60s and 70s did. It was sort of, how do we make this world credible emotionally? And so, and then for us, it's always, thinking about pathetic fallacy and that its relationship to the Gothic. And so it's not just weather, it's not just special effects, but it's also, how does the lighting, how do the shadows, how does every single thing, how does each camera move reflect the emotional kind of state of mind of the characters? So you should be able to pause the movie and understand what the characters are feeling inside that frame. Whether it's foreboding, whether it's dread, whether it's lust, whether it's something kind of disconcerting, it should make sense, and that's why it's just like the best thing in the world to work with this team, because it's a constant evolving conversation, and we're always pushing each other to do something kind of more emotionally gratifying.
You kind of pick your work out of that guidance of the visuals of Emerald, but all of us, including Emerald, works from the script, like each scene, each shot, to question what does the script ask for, kind of, and you discover it, and you set up rules, obviously, for yourself for how to make the film. But I think also we did integrate the sort of the weather, because it's in Yorkshire, where it takes place, where you have dramatic weather to work with. So it's a great metaphor for that we could use in different scenes too, and make sure we use the weather all the time, especially because we shot a lot on stage, including exteriors. So we integrated sort of rain to the scene with the father being drunk on the horse. It was very sad and very sort of, what do you call it, like humiliating for him to be looking like a sad dog in rain. And I mean that all, we also felt obviously that we needed different weather and make sure we show everything, but it's a matter of finding the time when is that best for which scene, or when is it snowing, when is it falling, when is it sunny, where's this glimpse of hope in the eyes of the actor, you know.
Well, and also when heartbreak occurs, the sky can be blood red, you know, and at Thrushcross it can exist in this sort of microclimate of everlasting spring, except when it's Christmas, where it always snows. You know, it's that those are the kind of decisions that, you know, you can make and that feel sort of immensely pleasurable and tell you so much, even if it's just outside a window.
Well, I'm curious, Linus, you know, you talk about being sort of driven by the emotional content of the script, but also, you know, you've got these performances by Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi, which are incredible. I mean, like, one of the highest compliments I can pay a movie is that it's weird, because even though there have been other movies and TV adaptations of this book, like, it's impossible for me now to think of any other actors as these characters. Like, they're so perfect. And I'm wondering, for you as a cinematographer, how do the performances inform your approach?
It's obviously key, absolutely key. I mean, if that wasn't right, it would have been. There's nothing worse, actually, for me to watch a film that doesn't give me an emotional pleasure, but still the visuals are beautiful, then it's actually provocative. So you need that, obviously, and they're genial, really, really brilliant, and also very engaged in every part of the filmmaking as well, and they're very easy to work with on set, like as intimate and as it was. I mean, I remember we had to, Emerald oftentimes wants to sort of shoot the rehearsals already in case something comes out of the performances too, so it's always a little bit challenging to do that, but we all love to do it, but also they were very accommodating for that. So, but really in the emotions, obviously, I guess it's a matter of how we also think of the scenes and block the scenes. What we did a lot was to kind of, like, we lit the room, and we kind of asked to actually Emerald put the actors also in the best of lights for that sort of situation, but you want to capture, obviously, the emotions in the best way. So it's kind of a case-to-case situation where you see the blocking of that scene, or where should we put the camera in order to get the most out of this, and how should we light it to get the emotions we want, which could be like there's a sadness to the scene, or you really want to see the tears in the eyes of an actor, or where's the best. Sometimes it's better to see them from behind. So it's kind of a, I guess we work more with composition-wise. I think we work quite a lot sort of from moment to moment. We didn't have an idea beforehand necessarily always, or we could have from just thinking of the scene, like a top shot of her lying on the floor or something like this. But when it comes to the actual sort of intimate scenes, I think we just want to be there and be sort of painterly with it and expressive. It was very much done on I think, a situation.
Well, and also we have a shot list. You know, we do quite a kind of rigorous shot list with Andy, the brilliant first, and that's sort of sometimes in order to upend it. You know, so I think why I love again. This talk could be called "Why I Love Working with Linus." In fact, that could just be my autobiography. But I think the thing is that it's a similar thing as we work really, really hard and we plan rigorously in order to be surprising on the day. And
Right, yeah.
and so, you know, we have it all ready, and then you see something more interesting, and we're always looking for that thing that is sort of most kind of intimate, exciting, kind of, and really you can only do that on the day. It's why I think doing a storyboard would be quite difficult, because I think I don't like to be hemmed in too much, but we do like to plan.
It's kind of a little bit of a long process where things slowly evolve. Some scenes might actually be very perfectly clearly planned already, while others evolve finalizes on the day. So that's what I mean. I guess like you can't really know if it is an emotional scene. You can't really know the shots yet until you really see the actors and we work with them together. And it's sort of, but absolutely a lot of things were obviously planned ahead.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, that's the fun. You plan and then you're like, nah.
Well, I think that kind of speaks to what I love about the movie, which is it does have a certain amount of precision, and you feel like you're in good hands as an audience member right from the beginning. It feels like you're both like very in control of what you're doing, and yet there's so much life. The movie just teems with life, and again, like the performances just are, they're sort of like busting out of the sides of the frame. And it's interesting that you brought up Powell and Pressburger, because I feel like that's something that their movies have, is they're very visually precise, but they're also just emotionally explosive. And I was wondering, like, what were some of the, aside from Powell and Pressburger, were there any other references or influences that you talked about as, either models or just things to kind of think about as you were making this movie?
I think a lot of the references that we have aren't movies, so they tend to be,
Paintings.
Yeah, paintings. So whether it's kind of Fragonard, The Swing, yes, Rembrandt, Caravaggio, lots of lighting, texture, shape, a lot of brutalist structures we looked at. And then I suppose there were some things that we did look at, the like old studio soundstage movies, of course, because of the build. It's interesting to see how that worked and how expressive those were. So we did look at sort of the painted backdrops of Gone with the Wind. And there was some sort of David Lean references, just to look at kind of that exterior, interior world that we were building. But generally speaking, it's a much wider, you kind of, I think it's easier
You built
to
a
do it.
palette with like, a lot of things, like it could be, for the Moors you had like, maybe, romanticism paintings and you had like photographs of unclear intestines things and there could be a mix of that and brutalism, which sort of in the combination becomes the movie. It's like that more than specific things. I kind of always like to rather not get too much visual references, but like it could be other things about the film as well that is important, just whatever intentions that could be just spoken about without. But when I look for visual references personally, I feel like I always like to go away from film and go into more like photography or art. And in this particular, I think it's a lot of like romanticism paintings mostly.
Yeah, and a lot of offal, a lot of
Disgusting stuff
interior
also.
structure of the heart and its relationship to the shape of a tree, and that sort of stuff. That's the real fun, because then you get to you get to sort of open lots of little doors.
Well, it's interesting because you talked earlier about the textures and things. I mean, this is the wettest movie I've ever seen in my life. It's just like between the hands going through goopy things and rain and fog and everything else. And and also in terms of texture, you shot on film, right? So like that's part of it too. Talk a little bit about what that gives you.
Well, I think what it really does is I just love film because one, I can work with it organically. It's an organic sort of format that is not, if you have a digital camera and the camera is still and there's a wall, then it's actually still image and it's not moving. So the film moves and it sort of automatically helps with suspending the disbelief, I think, like in general. But also it sort of captures colors and shades of colors greatly. And it's a huge difference, in my opinion, it's a huge difference when we do tests, even within the film range, whether you shoot 16mm or 35, and everyone can see the difference Super 8 and IMAX. So there's a great range of natural ways to work expressively with the camera, and instead of applying something in post that you don't know yet what that's going to look like, for me it's comfortable to know what I'm doing and how it looks, and that Emerald gets the images every day in a way that is actually how the film's going to look, and in this film as well, it's like, I think on a daily basis, this is how the film looked, and then in the DI we do adjustments to make it match across, but the look is there, and it's explored by testing, and it's really helping the richness of colors and subtle shades between one color to another, especially in skin tones and so on. So to me, it's much more emotional, and I know we tested shooting this on 65, for example, and Emerald felt it was too fine grained. It's like got almost too fine, and we tested pushing process and pull process, which creates a different contrast on the film, and we landed on normal process for this, but it was just because the test looked best that way for this film, and so it matters. It's like it matters just like the fabric on your clothes matters if it's like looks like wool or if it is wool or whatever. Like it's like that, I think. So it's really helps with it being expressive, I think, and especially if it's a colorful film, you get it inherent in the film, and you don't need to add color. So to me, it's always a natural format to shoot on film. We also on this film we shot sort of the wide shots we shot on VistaVision, which is the reason for it really was just to. Sometimes I feel like when you look at small things in frame, and people are actually small, and your eyes goes there, then it could be better to go on a larger format to see that better and not get disturbed by the frame. But that's too nerdy to talk about.
It's not too nerdy.
No, but it's really. I think this definitely should have been shot on film and was shot on film, so I'm happy about that. But
well, and also if you're building an imaginary world, it's got to be real. That's I suppose the trick of movie making and the joy of movie making is that we did make this imaginary world. It is sort of, it is sort of far-fetched in lots of ways, but it literally existed in the same way that the film literally exists.
Yeah.
And the feeling of the hands that make things, whether it's Charlie's music or the film itself or the skin wool, which is actually made made out of Margot's, not her real skin, because she wouldn't let us skin her because she's not professional. But it has to be tactile, and so the thing that you were saying about kind of wetness of this movie and the sensory elements of this movie, film is just inherent in that because it's there, it exists, and I think we all are looking for that feeling now.
Well, since this is the Cinematech, I think it's okay to get nerdy, and I do have one more format question, which is, how did you guys land on the aspect ratio, the 1:5 aspect ratio? Because I can see the arguments for it. You could have done it 1:3:3, you could have done it in scope. I think there are arguments with this subject matter for all of those. So how did you land on this?
I think I remember we discussed it could have been a 2:4 movie, and it could have been a 1:3:3 movie actually, and somehow Saltburn was 1:3:3, and we love that format. It's a beautiful format, I think. But there's something to this being a classic sort of. It sort of was also inspired by the classic old Hollywood, which was in 1:3:3. But it was the intent is you go to a cinema and you see it as big as possible on the screen. And oftentimes nowadays, unfortunately, the screens are 185, and you see a 2:4 movie with not matting, like you don't have this matte. You have just the blackout, like on the TV, on the actual projection, and it's a digital projection. Then you see sort of a little bit of gray there, and it just doesn't feel so nice. So unless the film goes in a 2:4 cinema in 2:4, then the 185 screens are the larger format, and also because we wanted to work painterly with the film, and then you could argue 1:6:6 would be the most sort of golden ratio, but 185 is next to it, I think, in that regard. So we could also compose a little more we had the sets that was sort of tall. The Wuthering Heights set was tall, and I think it could have been also cheaper, honestly. But I'm glad it's this way, because it looks a little more like sort of painterly compositions, I think, rather than cinematic compositions, which it would have been maybe a little bit different, but.
Well, also I think Saltburn, we always talked about it as a Saltburn is, you know, a portrait, and this is a landscape.
Yeah.
And so it is always about kind of, I think it's very difficult to block something in a painterly fashion if you're kind of in a strip. And also we kind of went out to Yorkshire, we took, you know, Linus took loads of beautiful photographs in lots of different formats, and this was the one that we just kept. It's sort of an instinct, we just both kept going back to it.
Well, we definitely discussed it, because I think
Yeah.
everything like format, if you overexpose or not, like however you test, and the aspect ratios, and every single thing has to be, you have to have the right thing for the film. So it is a discussion always, I think. It's not clear, it wasn't clear, but it was for sure, you're right, it was rather sort of a land, you wanted to show the scope of things, but at the same time, it could be more sort of painterly compositions, because it's also about her being lonely a lot. She's lying on a rock, or she's sort of sitting in a room, and you could do lonesome compositions, which gets more, I think, powerful in a taller format than 240.
Well, aside from being a very wet movie, and I guess kind of connected to that, this is an incredibly sexy movie, and the actors are incredibly sexy, and you just really pull the audience in. And one of the things I liked about it is you kind of use sex scenes in this movie the way that, like, Singing in the Rain uses song and dance numbers or something. Like, it's kind of there as a sort of expressive of whatever's going on inside the characters, as a kind of storytelling tool. And so what kinds of conversations did you have about how the two of you wanted to approach the lighting and the photography of the sex scenes to kind of get the maximum, I guess, sexiness out of it?
I just think it's the same as any other scene, isn't it? You know, really, there's no different to shooting a sex scene or to any other scene, because it's about the same thing, and it's about, you know, characters' relationships to each other and the space between them. And there were a few things, obviously, we had to kind of work out in advance. For example, the stable scene, because we needed to build the stables in order to kind of make sure that we could get that light in, you know, Margot's eyes and things like that. So obviously it's a big conversation with Susie and the intimacy coordinator Miriam and all of that. But really, for me, there's absolutely no difference. And an effective sex scene is only effective if you believe it emotionally and you care. So I think that's always the thing here, is that is this going to be more, you know, is this intimate scene going to be more effective than just silhouette and looking at the space between these actors' mouths, or is it going to be more effective if we're super, super, super close and we can see him lick her tears? You know, that's the stuff of, and one of the most effective sex scenes, I think, this is the underside of a snail, which is a macro lens. You know, like it's always what is going to communicate most clearly, the feeling. And you know, that's why I don't think sex scenes need to be explicit to be very, to give a very primal response.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was just sort of from scene to scene, or to just think what would be the more emotionally right here, basically. And I mean, and same with compositions, and how she's watching this thing going on down below, and you don't really exactly see what's going on from her point of view, and then suddenly a hand pops up on her eyes and mouth, which is Emerald's brilliant idea. That it's just building tension and go from shot to shot, and just trust your instinct in what would be more powerful and discuss.
And it's totally that you can make so many decisions as well. There's a version of this where you see Heathcliff's legs over. There's, you know, a big kind of wide profile shot where you can see Kathy watching, and you can see him but without his head looking down on her. And we could have played the whole scene like that. That we could have showed everything that was happening downstairs. There's so many decisions that get made when it comes to a scene like that about what is the most gratifying, the most tense. You know, it's always, you know, you have to do, you know, you just do it the same way with everything. You get what you think you need, and then, you know, you see how music and editing and all of that helps afterwards.
Well, I know we've got another movie that's going to come in here in a few minutes, so I'll wrap this up. But
What is it? Is it Goat?
but this was a great way to start off Valentine's Day. It's a great movie, and I really appreciate you both coming out and taking the time to talk with us about it. So thank you.